to do. We got a couple of burgers at Frack Burger, and then we went over to the tap room for a couple of adult beverages. And it was a lot of fun. They allow you to bring in food there, and they even had a Fultano's pizza menu. So if you want to go there and watch a game, you can order a pizza to be delivered.
Okay, that's pretty good.
So that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Councilor Height.
So my Canby area transit update is that there's a rider alert that they put out. So they're changing a stop. So where Canby Square and Safeway is going to be closed. The bus won't go into the Safeway parking lot any longer. So if you want to head to Oregon City, you'll go to the Vietnam era Memorial area. And if you want to go towards Aurora, that direction, it's in front of Walgreens. So rider alert if you ride the bus. These are around too, but that's an important thing to communicate, I think. Their new Route 99 is going well. Apparently, riders have adapted to that. And the Rider of the Month is Emma Trevejo. And Canby, the library, of course, the big news is our new director. Welcome. And there's a couple new programs that they've initiated which are interesting for kids. I'm pretty excited about that personally. There's an Oregon Battle of the Book study group going on now for 3rd through 5th graders, 6th through 8th graders. It's a statewide kind of program, and local libraries are taking that on. I'm so pleased Canby's doing that. And also a book club for 2nd and 3rd graders even on one Saturday a month. So it's just so interesting to see how things are always changing and they're reaching different community needs there. I'm impressed with that. There's going to be a Day of the Dead celebration on Halloween at 11 a.m. at the library. So that'll be interesting. And there's a WorkSource Oregon program. I think this is interesting. October 21st, 10 to 2:30, job help, job coaching, interview coaching, life skills. So great programs there. School board, the kindergartners are adjusting to their all-day hall, and they're doing it. They're doing superbly, I think, at this point. They increased. There's now the halftime counselor and PE teacher position. The principals have weighed in and saying they're seeing a difference. Staff is appreciative. Good. They're professionals, they're certified, so there's a lot of expertise being brought there. And the Smarter Balance, the state tests, those results came in, as you might have seen the Canby Herald. So staff are looking at those and trying to figure out how to close the achievement gap, and teachers are using those results to inform their teaching practices, of course. But that was a big change this year with that new test. The County Commissioner Town Hall, which was at the fairgrounds a couple weeks ago, I went to that. The themes were safety and roads and safety, or health and safety, really. A lot of the conversation was about homeless vets in the county. That was interesting. Some a little bit on transportation, but not a whole lot. And they spoke about marijuana also and their options that they're looking at in the county for, as we are here in Canby. So that was good to go. I'm glad they came to town for that. The Taste of Autumn, the Canby Educational Foundation had their first ever wine tasting event out on Lone Elder Road last Saturday, I think, and it was fun, well attended, beautiful night, and they raised a lot of money for the school district, so kudos to them and all those organizers. It was a great event. I dropped in on the Friends of the Library meeting today. I haven't been there for months since I was on the board, but it was good to see those folks. And they are organizing again for their 2nd annual tour of homes. As you recall, I think last December they did their first ever. It was very successful, so they're trying to sort of winnow down and figure out who are going to be which homes will be represented this year, but they'll be working on that, and you'll get an invitation, I'm sure, for that in December. So go Friends. I wanted to say thanks to Dave Rankin, with Just Serve. He came a couple weeks ago and presented. He's not here tonight, but I'm pointing at the desk here. He presented to us about that big volunteer program. So apparently he organized about 200 volunteers to work for the parks. They did Eco Park and Canby Community Park. So it's just a great service to our Parks Department. It was an impressive show of organization.
Great turnout, yeah.
Well done, guys. So thanks to them. And what else? Oh, one other volunteer event that I just heard about on Facebook, actually. There's a group that does beautification work from the Molalla River. I think they're called Molalla River Cleanup Group. October 17th, big volunteer event they're putting on, 9 a.m. They're going to be cleaning up some areas of the river near Ford, and under Knight's Bridge, and I think at the community park too. So there's lots of work to be done there if more people want to get involved in a community park cleanup. So October 17th on there. And that's all I have.
Question for you, Councillor Height. With the new light rail piece opening up there in Milwaukee, have we ironed out? Are we connecting? How's that?
Oh, with CAT, you mean?
Yeah, with CAT connecting into Oregon City, and with that, is that still something that's in the works?
No, we end at Oregon City.
Right.
So then you catch, I'm not sure which bus it is.
33.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. So that's where it ends, is the transit center in Oregon City.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sure.
Good. You didn't
Council
know I
President
said
Dale.
that, did you?
Ready?
I am, sir.
Likewise, along with Clint, attended the ribbon cutting for 4-8 Financial. And my congratulations to Paul and Stephanie Carlson for going independent, so to speak, and striking out on their own. And my very best wishes to them. It's a great, great accomplishment. Wish them well. On the Canby utility front, if you get the Canby Herald, you've already seen that they are proposing a 12.7% average rate increase. Now, the bulk of that is due to Bonneville Power Administration's biannual rate increases. So don't yell at Bob and Dan, okay? It's not their fault. But as part of that procedure, there is a rate hearing coming up. That's October 27th at 7 p.m. at Canby Utilities headquarters. And you can also email your comments into them or snail mail them in if you'd like to comment on the rate increase. And those are accepted until 3 o'clock that day, right?
Yes, sir.
All righty. And that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Easy enough. Thank you. Councillor Hensley.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. My committee liaisons were a little light on the attendance this time around. We had no quorum for the Traffic Safety Commission, so I'll report on that next month. We also had no quorum for CTV5, so I'll report next month. But I did want to make mention, though, the one thing that was taken care of at the CTV5 meeting was an acceptance of a letter of resignation from Walt Daniels from the board. So I wanted just to give him a shout out. He has served the board well, as he always does with every service that he does for the city. And so a lot of years of service from Mr. Daniels. So once again, I get to thank Walt Daniels and like doing that. C4, you already talked about that, so I don't need to elaborate. I think you covered that well. Canby Main Street. I guess we get to talk about community stuff now. It's that time of year again. It's Halloween. We get the Spooktacular Village at the fairgrounds on Halloween, and it's a Saturday this year. And we are going to do the parade again and trick-or-treating downtown, 4 p.m. on Saturday of Halloween. And also on the community front, I attended the Chili Cook-Off, which you'll hear about more later, and the Bridging Cultures Picnic in the Park at Way Park. And finally, the American Legion Auxiliary is actually having a membership drive right now. So if you're interested in more information on how to become an auxiliary member, you can give Marcia a call down at the Legion or attend the auxiliary breakfast on October 25th and speak to someone there. That's all I have.
And October 25th, I'm sorry, who's doing the breakfast that day?
That's auxiliary, so that's when the best gravy happens.
That's when the best gravy happens. Gravy with a side of gravy.
That's right.
Okay. Thank you.
They might put some potatoes or something
Maybe.
under there if you want them to, or they'll just put it in a bowl.
Councilor Parker.
In liaison reports, we're lucky to actually have our bike pedestrian chair with us tonight, so I think we'll be hearing from her on some of her thoughts. But the committee is continuing to work with coordinating with other jurisdictions in trying to get both information out and connections with bike lanes and bike routes. And thanks to Don Devner, who has encouraged me to get in training for Cycle Oregon next year. So you'll see this middle-aged man causing a traffic problem as he's navigating through town, so be patient with him. In terms of the Historic Review Board, this board has exploded beyond my wildest dreams. These folks are doing so much, both at a theoretical level of applying for the state historic designation and on the ground by gathering photographs and documents about the city hall and taking photographs and gathering things as we move into a new city hall. So I just can't say enough about how this team has really started working. I was at the first Friday. Also, I was very pleased that we have now what appears to be Artisan Village. And the mayor's right that Jamie deserves a lot of credit for turning a criticism into a good idea. And the mayor was a little bit modest. He also put a little bit of oil in the water on that too. So thank you for your calmingness. Councillor Hensley left out the fact that she and I both attended the Bridging Cultures event at Waite Park. It was first time moved from Locust Street Park to Waite Park. I loved it there, and we had. And in particular, it's mostly the Mennonite Church that's behind the Bridging Cultures. But what was so cool this time, instead of being at Locust Park, right downtown, you had people off the street wandering by, seeing that there were free hamburgers and hot dogs, getting in line, and then hanging around and asking what's going on. So it's a tremendous opportunity to bring together both the Spanish-speaking culture and Anglo culture. I wanted to thank the transit department, also the library having booths, and especially the police department. It was so neat. Officer Stephanie showed up, who was bilingual, and was wandering through the crowd and talking to people, and that's our department's come a long ways. That's really exciting. Also, yes, we'll hear more about the chili cook-off and the extraordinary physical transformation that one of our counselors underwent for this competition.
Did we bring pictures?
And I want to do a shout out to Oliver Insurance. You know, it's not just the city that helps with the downtown beautification. It is people like Oliver Insurance installed some wonderful new outside foliage. Looks great. Also, Mayor, if Clint talked about his visit to the new tap room, if we're going to start adding our visits, I'm going to need another half hour for my counselor comments. And finally, a note about our Main Street manager, who doesn't pay much attention to me. When a couple years ago, when she came on board and we went to the state Main Street program, and somebody during the award presentation was called up and named Main Street Manager of the Year. And Jamie said to me, as the liaison to Main Street, "That's going to be me." And I said, you know, really, you know, the people that go up, they've been here a long time. You know, this is a legacy sort of thing. You know, just be. Well, she doesn't pay any attention to me, and she has been awarded the Main Street Manager of the Year award for Oregon. So, you picked that up a long time ago.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
Good report. Thank you. And so,
And congratulations.
appreciate the compliment. Oil and water? I didn't think they mixed.
Oil on water that calms the water.
All right, thank you for clarifying. I wanted to make sure I had.
Insult, right?
Which preposition was that? You and
Was it a backhand?
you and I are oil and water.
So we can
Thank you, sir. Counselor Rocha, what
Thank
do
you,
have for us
Mr.
tonight?
So in the last council meeting, I mentioned that I was going to be going to the chili cook-off safety fair. I thank Canby Fire for really doing a lot of work there. My company participated in it. I will announce on TV that we got Best Booth and People's Choice for chili, so I'm pretty happy with that. We actually dressed up as the Village People and sang the YMCA song twice.
Excellent.
Yeah, if you can believe that. So the only thing that was missing was Columbia Bank. Apparently is there every year, and they've won it quite a bit. That's right. And they weren't there. So this is an official challenge for next year. Throwdown for Columbia Bank to be there next year. So
And it was on camera.
it was on
Tough
camera.
cuff.
Officially, geek.
Yeah. That's all I have.
That's all you can.
Excellent. Now, did you give proper kudos to your wife for making the chili? Oh,
Chocolate chili with linguiça.
I sit here corrected.
And or the
It was her recipe, but I made it.
Excellent. Thank you all very much. Consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I move for passage of the consent agenda, which includes the approval of the minutes of the September 16th, 2015 City Council regular meeting.
And I'll second that.
Motion has been made by Council President Dale and seconded by Councilor Hensley to approve the consent agenda, which includes the minutes of the September 16th, 2015 City Council regular meeting. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Carries 6-0. Next on our agenda this evening is a public hearing. We will be hearing about the CPA 15-02/TA 15-01, the North Redwood Development Concept Plan, which is continued from September 16th, 2015. Excuse me as I read our official statement for the public hearing format. The matter presently before the hearing body requires a public hearing. All interested persons in attendance shall be heard on the matter. If you wish to testify on this matter, please fill out a yellow comment card, like here, and give it to the city recorder, who is sitting there at the end. Kim, wave. There we go. At the appropriate time, please step forward to the microphone, state your name and interest in the matter. Those people other than the applicants that are interested in testifying as either proponents or opponents, please indicate your desire to speak by raising your hand at this time. Okay. For longer presentations, proponents and opponents may buy time from one another. In so doing, those either in favor or opposed may allocate their time to a spokesperson who will represent the entire group. You may be limited by the time for your presentation. The applicant will have a total of, Brian, Matilda, how much time do we need tonight?
15, 20 minutes presentation.
Okay, we'll do 15 minutes to speak. The proponents will be allowed 3 minutes each, and the opponents will be allowed 3 minutes each. The applicant will then have 3 minutes for rebuttal. All questions must be directed through the mayor. Any evidence to be considered must be submitted to the hearing body for public access. All written testimony received both for and against shall be summarized by staff and presented briefly to the hearing body during the staff report. Testimony and evidence must be directed toward the applicable review criteria contained in the staff report, the comprehensive plan, or other land use regulations which the person believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue may preclude appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Conflict of interest. At this time, I would ask that any member of the hearing body who has a conflict of interest please indicate the nature and extent of the conflict and whether you intend to participate in or abstain from hearing the present matter. Councilor Roach?
No.
No conflict?
No conflict, sorry.
No conflict.
No conflict.
No conflict?
I attended the planning commission meeting, sir, where I saw the approval of this.
Okay, you can bring that up at the next part. Have you had any conflicts of interest?
No.
Okay, nor have I. Thank you. Ex parte contact. Also, if any member of the hearing body has had any ex parte contact with anyone prior to this hearing, including a visit to the site, please declare the nature and extent of which contact at this time.
I drive by there every day, but
Okay.
Like the rest of the council, I received an email today concerning it, but it's a part of the record now.
Email, no other contact.
No other contact.
Planning.
Right, so we had a planning meeting on this piece, and then, yes, the email that has come through in the last little bit today. Does any member of the audience have any questions for any councilor or the mayor regarding ex parte contact or conflicts of interest? All right, seeing none, the public hearing will be conducted as follows. We will have the staff report. Questions, if any, by the hearing body or staff. I will then open the public hearing for testimony. The applicant will have not more than, I think I said, 5 minutes, 15 minutes. The proponents, not more than 3 minutes. Opponents, not more than 3 minutes. And then rebuttal by applicant, not more than 3 minutes. I will close the public hearing. Questions, if any, by the hearing body. Then we'll have discussion by the hearing body. A decision shall be made by the hearing body at the close of the hearing, or the matter will be continued to a date certain in the future. This will be the only notice of that date you will receive. Does anyone have any questions about the procedure of the hearing? All right. We'll move into the staff report.
Hi.
Good evening.
Nice to see everyone. This has been a long haul for this plan. It's kind of an exciting evening. Staff is hoping that the recommended plan will be approved by the council. We started this project in November. We did this project to help satisfy a code requirement for properties in certain areas of the city designated on our annexation map. Property owners or the applicant developers, whoever wants to annex, prior to annexation, they have to have a development concept plan in place. So the brief history of this is that this is a large area, North Redwood area, about 66 acres. And there have been several efforts in the past, over the past probably 10 years or more, from staff as well as property owners to create such a plan. But because this area is quite complicated with natural resources, some challenges and steep slopes, traffic circulation on a collector street, and a lot of property owners involved. It's been very difficult for people to successfully do that. So, in a nutshell, we are very fortunate to be able to obtain assistance through a state grant program to engage the services of our consulting team, who have experience in creating development concept plans and master plans for neighborhoods that have complex issues to address. And the three of our team members, consulting team members, are here this evening, and they're going to do a presentation of the recommended plan that was approved by the Planning Commission on the 28th of September. They recommended approval. The council approved the plan as presented. So we've had the consultants are going to present, and I'm hoping that they'll be able to address a lot of the questions that we know from the Planning Commission hearing and from contacts throughout the process. So we're going to hit the highlights and address any of the concerns that we have heard over the course of this plan. And the plan has been developed with a large stakeholder advisory group and a technical advisory group, and we've had several public meetings as well as property owner interviews. So that will also come out in the presentation. So I'm assuming you've read the Planning Commission staff report, so I don't need to probably go blow by blow on that, but staff obviously recommended approval of the project, and it has met all of our code requirements for our comp plan amendment as well as a text amendment. So I would like to have our consultants. We have Ken Perry here from Walker Macy. He's the project manager for our consulting team. We also have Brian Vanneman from Leland Consulting here and Matt Hasty from Angelo Planning. They're all going to have a brief moment at the podium here to take pieces of the project forward, presentation forward. So I would like them to launch into this if that's possible, because I think the questions are more appropriately directed as we present the draft plan to the public.
Thank you, Matilda.
It's that.
Thanks, Matilda.
And we can bat questions back and forth.
Yeah. And thank you, Mr. Mayor and councilors, for having us here today. We've really enjoyed working on this project over, it's about exactly a year. And we have something that I just need to fix on our computer. Maybe that'll go away, but it's hiding something pretty important. So. Can you just hit the little X? So, as I was saying, we've been working on this for a year, and we've arrived at the culmination of what we believe has been a really successful process, and we've really enjoyed working with the people of Canby. I wanted to mention Matilda's efforts on the project. We've really enjoyed working with her, and her support has been really impressive. And Brian has also been a key part of the project. I also like to mention the efforts of the Stakeholder Advisory Committee, which included a lot of property owners in the area, including some private citizens, and then our Technical Advisory Committee, which included a lot of local agency representatives as well as state and regional representatives, and they were very useful. And Matilda introduced the team. They'll come up and talk and have a piece to say. As Matilda mentioned, I was the project manager for the effort. So I'll start off with a brief description of the concept plan and our recommendation for the plan. So as I mentioned, we're at the culmination of quite a lot of activity on this plan. We've held 3 of the sort of committee advisory meetings, interspersed with 2 public events, which were really well attended, and we got some really good input over at the police headquarters. We've presented a longer version of this to you at a work session back in August, and of course we had Planning Commission approval 2 weeks ago. So the study area, just as a recap, 66 acres on the eastern edge of the city, on sort of bounded by Highway 99, North Redwood, and the sort of Willow Creek natural area and territorial to the north. Just in terms of its location, it's got a lot of really great proximity to natural amenities like Willow Creek and the Willamette River and the Eco Park property, the logging road trail. So we think that it's got a lot of attributes that would attract potential residents, least of all the proximity for someone commuting to the metro area. So in terms of the actual physical layout, there are 18 owners of 23 tax lots in the study area. And you can see in this topographic map the sort of canyon that's formed by Willow Creek. And that does form a major environmental constraint, but it's also an opportunity for the future community. So we developed some criteria for the concept plan. I've bolded some of the key words that we think apply to this. And these criteria were developed with the help of city staff and referring to your vision for your community and previous plans. And we vetted this with the committees and and in public events. But a key thing is that this plan should feel like it's integrated with the city of Canby. It's not sort of a gated community off to the side that doesn't feel like Canby. This should just feel like a natural extension. It should be walkable and a cohesive neighborhood, not a collection of sort of self-contained pods that aren't connected. There should be, and we've really made an effort to distribute impacts from the natural area equitably to individual property owners, and to consider the different timing the different owners might have with development. Similarly, in terms of infrastructure and roads, we've been careful to consider that there be an efficient layout and that any costs to development be reasonable. And then I bolded number 10 that that Willow Creek natural area we think is a really great opportunity as an amenity. So speaking of that, we've done some preliminary calculations of that Willow Creek environmental area, and we've calculated there's a roughly 9.3 acres in that green zone, which includes things like slopes over 25%, potential wetlands, which have in the past been delineated, but that delineation has expired, so future development would have to re-delineate, re-flag the perimeter. There is a FEMA 100-year flood boundary. If anybody remembers the 96 flood, there was water all the way up to territorial and south. And then just in between all those areas, there's flat land, but it's going to be really difficult to access those areas down steep slopes around wetlands. So we've included that in that zone. So it's worth pointing out that that zone is not in great shape. It's not home to any sensitive species. There's no ESA listed salmon, but there is trout in there, and it needs a lot of restoration and a lot of help. But there may be some partnership opportunities with state agencies or private groups that could help with that restoration, because it is an important habitat area. It's also worth pointing out that this is the city is expressing a unique commitment to helping property owners by accepting this natural area as dedicated parkland. And I'll have Brian and Matt will describe that in more detail. But that again is a great opportunity for property owners. So the zoning in the parcel, the majority of it is LDR, which is low density residential, and I'll describe what sort of homes result from that zoning. And I should point out that this is not city zoning yet. This is from your comprehensive plan. This will guide eventual zoning. So LDR is the equivalent roughly of R1. And then south of the LDR, there's the medium density residential, which is roughly equivalent to R2. What, 1.2?
Well, excuse me, R1.5.
R1.5,
R2
sorry.
is the high density.
Yeah. And then there's a parcel on the very south end, HDR, which would be R1.5. R2, sorry. So this is our recommended concept. And this concept, we believe that this maximizes the value of parcels, incorporates that natural area that we described along Willow Creek. It responds well, we believe, to topography and other natural features. And it's important to note that there will be a lot of flexibility in this layout. So this is a recommended concept. And as Matt will describe in detail, the code allows for that flexibility, but also notes that there are some key things that the plan that needs to see from eventual developers' plans, because we realize private owners will create their own plans with their own engineers and planners. But just as a way to help city planners like Matilda understand and compare the two and evaluate future plans against and see how successful they are in meeting this overall concept. So it's worth pointing out too that in the math around this plan, there are 15 acres in roadways, which is based on our experience in private development. That's about par for the course for redevelopment. So there isn't an undue amount of roads described, but it does provide really good connectivity across North Redwood with the other neighborhoods to the west. And then it's worth pointing out that the total comes to just under 66 acres, and that's because there will be a dedication of land on the east side of North Redwood for the improvement of that street at a later date, once it becomes a city street. So some details about the plan. When we zoom into the Willow Creek Natural Area, we're proposing a 1-acre park as sort of a trailhead park at the top of the slope that would serve as an informal pocket park and an amenity for the neighborhood. The eventual configuration of that to be determined working with developers. There is also a pedestrian bridge shown. And in earlier plans, we showed a vehicular bridge. And our engineers on the team, we had a civil engineering firm named OTAC who studied, they've done a lot of these bridges, and they found that a bridge across that canyon, which can be up to 30, 35 feet deep from top of slope to bottom of slope, would just be too expensive. And we do think it's important to bridge that somehow, but you can do a pedestrian bridge for much cheaper. But that pedestrian bridge could help to ensure that the eastern side of Willow Creek doesn't feel isolated and that can feel as integrated in this community. That pocket would be accessed from a cul-de-sac extending off North Teakwood Street, and there would be a limited amount of lots, no more than 15 in that area, and those would be large lots compatible with the adjacent Willow Creek estates. There is ideally an emergency-only access across the Union Pacific Railroad. This is a photo showing that current access. That would require a lot of negotiation with Union Pacific and ODOT, and that's not ever easy. So it's not essential to the project's success, but according to we've talked with the fire department, and that's not going to be something that's a deal killer in terms of the project. Ideally, that would occur, but ODOT and Union Pacific are generally trying to close such crossings. So in terms of the zoning, just to describe what that looks like, we estimate that there will be a range of possible housing counts in this community, anywhere from 213 to 289. That sounds precise. That's sort of an estimate based on the capacity of the plan. Based on 2.7 residents per unit, that would equal a range of 575 to 780 residents housed in this community. So the majority of the area is going to be the LDR, which is large lots, 7,000 to 10,000 square feet. And, at the lower end of the range, you would get 155 units on the smaller lots. If you had bigger lots, you get 103 units. And similarly, applying that to medium lots, you would get a range of housing types. And then in that that parcel on the south end, you could build small apartments or townhouses or duplex units of roughly 3,000 square feet, which yields about 26 units. It's also worth pointing out that we're showing housing types, and we've tried to show a range. There's absolute flexibility to future landowners as to that type in terms of the design of the homes and the layout. They could be front-loaded with garages in the front, or alley-loaded, which is not a common housing type in Canby yet, but it's pretty popular in other communities locally. So, because of our experience in creating master plan communities, we wanted to test the capacity of the community. We're not prescribing lot layouts at all with this plan, but this is a demonstration to landowners. This is how you could use our plan and lay it out with lots. So this is one way, one concept. We do understand, obviously, that owners will hire their own planning and engineering teams and use this plan as a guide. And in this layout, we achieved 237 lots, which is right in the middle of our estimates. So we know that the concept plan works from that standpoint. And just some details worth pointing out. I mentioned flexibility between alley-loaded and front-loaded. Here's a block that assumes garage-loaded homes. Here's a block with alley-loaded homes. So these are little alleys behind the homes. The one place where you're going to have alleys is along North Redwood, because you can't have a bunch of garages with curb cuts off North Redwood. You'll have to have alleys behind with garages. But that'll provide a really nice street frontage on North Redwood. Other things worth pointing out, a pedestrian connection to encourage people to walk from this public edge through the community across North Redwood and access the logging road trail further west. And then here's the layout on the south. So just in terms of transportation, we've based the street design and the layout on your recently completed transportation system plan from 2012. There is one thing in that TSP that's going to be adjusted. It's in the process of being adjusted, and that is the Auto Road extension. And in that plan, Auto Road was going to extend over 99 and Union Pacific through the community. It was going to be a truck route. We looked at that, and it was just going to be really disruptive and very expensive. So we recommended removal of that, and that has been, or it is in process of being removed from your TSP. And again, that just improves the quality and the potential of this community. So the TSP now merely shows where our potential grid connections are suggested to the west of North Redwood. The streets that are shown, the street cross sections that are shown on the right, are from your TSP. So North Redwood would become a collector. It would take somewhat the form shown on this cross section. Half of that has been built to your old standards. The eastern half would be upgraded with bike lanes and sidewalks and street trees. Of these sections, we think we really recommend that you pursue planting street trees just as a key to livability and increasing home values and creating the shade of a tree canopy over the streets. It's not common yet in newer developments, but based on our experience, we really recommend that aspect of the street layout. So in terms of, here's an image I've included to show you North Redwood, its existing condition. You can see that eastern half is unimproved. That will be improved. It's currently a county road now. So another thing worth pointing out is that there is a Canby area transit line on North Redwood, and that would continue, and that provides good transit service to the future community. Potentially you could see a transit route going into the community if demand supported that. We think it's important that one key neighborhood route form a loop through the community, connecting at a cross street on North Redwood and coming back out in the north. That loop could start here and end here. This is our recommended concept, but again, there's flexibility. Other Other things worth pointing out that there was a question raised in the Planning Commission, will there be a need for a traffic signal? There's one on 99 now. There won't be a need. Based on the TSP, they knew that a plan like this was going to be prepared, that there was the capacity on this property to be redeveloped. They studied that intersection. It won't need a signal and doesn't even come close. So that will continue to operate well with its current four-way stop condition. Now with parks, I mentioned that 1 acre park, we suggest a pocket park / trailhead, maybe with a picnic area, a play area that's an amenity for future residents. I mentioned the pedestrian bridge. Here's an example of a pedestrian bridge that can be used by bikes as a way of encouraging connectivity across the canyon. The details of the trail design, that'll all be worked out later, but this is a significant amenity that will be something that can be used by the greater community. You have the logging road trail, but if you want a more natural connection alongside the creek, then that'll be a good option. And that's about a half-mile long trail too. So we think that's a key benefit to the city. So let's talk quickly about utilities before I pass it over to Matt. So again, we had civil engineers on the team, and they studied the capacity of water, sewer, and stormwater to handle new development. There is adequate capacity for water. There's a 12-inch line under North Redwood. The key point is that water, to keep water pressure, will need to connect to that line at least 2 points. To create a loop and sustain that pressure. But the neighborhood is fully served now. Sewer also, there's a line under North Redwood, so you're fully served with capacity there. There would be 2 basins here, and most of the neighborhood can be served with gravity draining to North Redwood. In this south corner of the property, there's a sort of a little glade down there that is below the grade of much of the rest of the site. That'll need a small pump station to get up to the rest of the elevation. And there would be some fill needed to get that sort of consistent gravity fed across the neighborhood. In terms of stormwater, you have some really good public works standards for how to treat stormwater. In this case, you're going to want to treat stormwater before it gets into Willow Creek. There are 5 basins on the site. There's actually almost 12 acres on the west edge of the site that can drain into the stormwater pipe that's under North Redwood. There's enough capacity there that you can use that. So that can serve those people. The other basins would have treatment facilities that are outlined in blue, and those would look, those would look engineered and mechanical. They can feel natural. There are standards in your code to encourage that, so they feel like they're sort of part of that natural area, and that helps to treat the quantity and the quality of the stormwater before it goes into the creek. So just to wrap up, I mentioned the criteria up front, and we've gone through those criteria and noted how we believe that the development plan meets those criteria in terms of integrating with the existing city fabric. You've got those really good connections. We're using street standards that encourage walkability with sidewalks and bike lanes. We're integrating all the parcels, so we're providing an equitable development pattern and opportunities for all the property owners. And then, as Brian will mention, we're distributing the funding and the economic impacts equitably. And we're understanding that some people will have different timing with their development. Some people might be ready to go right now. Some people, well, after annexation. Some people may wait a little longer. And I think I mentioned a lot of these points. So I will proceed and ask Brian to come up and talk about his points.
Any questions at the very end?
Yeah, and we'll take questions for the whole team.
All right. Well, thanks for having us. I'm going to talk very briefly about the funding plan for North Redwood. And I'll actually start with quote, other infrastructure. Most of the infrastructure that you see on the site that Ken has been talking about, roads, the sewer, water infrastructure in those roads, will be paid for by developers or property owners as they build out the site. So that's not really of concern to the city in terms of the city's finances. It is, of course, something we take into account as we're doing a plan and trying to make development costs reasonable. But as we look at most of these roads in here and the sewer and water that would be in them, that would be a developer cost or a property owner cost. And we do recognize, as Ken said, and as Matt will talk a little bit more about, some of those roads could change a bit in terms of their alignment. They could move a little north, south, east, west, as long as they're meeting the intent of the plan. I can talk more about those if people are interested. The kind of big funding issue here is the parks, because here you have a major piece of public infrastructure, if you consider park infrastructure, that where its presence falls disproportionately on some people's property and not on others. And our solution here is pretty straightforward. The city's current policy is that developments going forward and developers either pay for local parks through a systems development charges or dedication of land. And so what we're proposing here is that, just to take an example, if a property were to be over here and to be developed, that individual doesn't have parks land, so they would pay SDCs as they go forward and develop. By contrast, a property here with a lot of parkland would be compensated for the parkland that they're dedicating. So this property owner would have an appraisal and have the amount of parkland that's undeveloped appraised, and then they would count that value against the credit, against the SDCs that they owed. So if the SDCs are here, they have a credit for 2/3 of that. They pay 1/3 in SDCs. It's certainly possible that in some cases where there's a significant amount of parkland and less developable land, they could have more credits than SDCs owed, in which case the city would capture some of the money, the SDCs over here, and transfer it to the property to the east. That's the basic mechanism. Matt will talk a little bit about the density transfer, which is also to some degree involved in that.
All right, thanks for having me too. So I'm going to talk about zoning, essentially, and comprehensive plan amendments. So I think, as Ken mentioned and Brian mentioned, one of the goals here is to provide a certain amount of flexibility in terms of how future development occurs. This is a concept plan. We're not trying to nail down exactly where everything lands on the properties, but it's important to be consistent at the same time with the concept plan. So one of the areas of consistency is zoning. As Ken noted, the future zoning will be consistent with the comprehensive plan designations. If someone proposes something different, that will require an amendment to the comprehensive plan. And as Ken mentioned, there are a number of elements of the comprehensive plan that are really important to be consistent with, adhere to as things move forward. So connections to North Redwood from the area, really kind of minimize cul-de-sacs, so you've got a lot of connectivity, particularly for people walking and biking in the area, that you have that loop road that accesses the Willow Creek natural area and park, and that other streets intersect with that. That you have at least one additional north-south street in the area, again, to provide that connectivity. Where possible, roads or streets should be located to be kind of on either side of parcel lines, so you're spreading the cost of the road over multiple property owners. The North Teakwood extension's pretty key to development of the portion of the study area to the east of Willow Creek. We have some standards that are essentially city standards for the length of blocks, and that if you have a block longer than a certain amount, that you have a pedestrian connection in there, and that's the connection that Ken pointed out is to help meet that as well. Again, Ken talked about the alleys, and he talked about kind of the importance of the park and open space along Willow Creek. So those are the things that are important to essentially adhere to as development moves forward in the area. But there are some things that can be flexible. You know, some of those road alignments may change as long as you're meeting those essential pieces. They don't have to be exactly where we've shown them on the map. As Ken said, ultimately the design of trails in the park or the park facility will occur at the time that those are designed, and there's some flexibility there, as well as in variations of the block size. We showed some specific potential areas for some stormwater detention basins, but those may shift too. The city has standards for how stormwater is treated on site within developments, so as long as somebody's meeting that, there may be less or more need for some of those detention basins. So that can vary. The way we're proposing to sort of implement this from a development code perspective, couple of things. One, I'll talk about this sort of in a minute, but we're talking about allowing a certain amount of density transfer between those open space or constrained areas to the developable portions of property, and I'm going to show you a graphic and talk more about that in a moment. There's really not a lot of need for changes to the code because most of what we're talking about in this plan is already consistent with what your code allows. Your code already has lot size averaging and alternative lot layout provisions that allow for some flexibility in lot sizes within other areas of the city, including this area. But what we are proposing to do is create a plan district within your code, so all of that's kind of in one place. The things that I talked about as essential elements, those are identified as approval criteria for future developments in this area. It's clear in this plan district what you can do in terms of the transfer of density and the lot size averaging and alternative lot layouts. So that's all proposed to be both in a plan district specific to this area as well as a couple of tweaks where those things are mentioned in your code elsewhere. So I've got a graphic here just to kind of talk about this issue of the density transfer, because we had some comments and discussion about this at the Planning Commission meeting, and I think one of the email that came in related to this. So first, you've got kind of a table on the right that identifies which parcels have portions of the Willow Creek area going through them and how much of the parcel is covered by that. So you see some pretty big numbers there in a couple cases, you know, 35%, 45%. And that's really, again, a goal of ours has been to try to equitably distribute both costs and benefits of development among the different property owners here. And that's really the reason for proposing that transfer of density. It also figures into the funding calculation. It actually means the city, by allowing a little more, some smaller lots on some specific parcels, you're paying less in those SDC credits in that case. So it's kind of helps out from a financing point of view. I will note that, if I get this right, there's sort of, while we're allowing for smaller lots as the city already does in those provisions, there's kind of a limited number, which can still be important for a property owner, but you're not going to see a huge number of existing lots in these areas, given just kind of the size and location of where the developable portions of these properties are. So you're going to see the potential for some additional lots in some of these places, but it's not going to be a huge change, but it's going to be enough, I think, to really, again, just help distribute these costs more equitably amongst the different property owners within this area. So I just wanted to point that out. And it does not increase density sort of overall for the entire area. There's no change in the overall density. It simply allows for transferring some density from the constrained areas into the developable areas, but not an overall increase in density for the entire area. So I think that's it for me and us. And I'll be happy to answer questions. Yeah. I'm going to get up when Ken comes back, because he'll probably have to answer most of the questions. But
Thanks.
What's the process? Are we in a public hearing at this
No,
point?
we're still in the staff report piece, so now it's questions of staff and the report at all. Before I open up the public hearing piece. So questions at all? Yes, sir.
I'll direct this at Matilda, and then you can pass it off to whoever you want. How did the plan come up with the allocation of density? You know, you've got this, what appears to be a real small area at the bottom there for high density, and larger lots, presumably bigger, more expensive houses. It looks like this. What I fear is that someone could criticize this, is that this is a concept plan for rich people. These are going to be $300,000, $400,000 houses, and you've got only 26 units that are going to be multifamily. Did this come out of previous planning, or how did we? How did
the zoning that allowed for the type of development? That's from our comprehensive plan. So when this property would be annexed, normally property will be annexed and take on the zoning of the comprehensive plan. That's where the zoning is. That's the allocation of low density, medium density, high density. And that
so only this one little part at the bottom.
That's what was there. We didn't change anything. That's exactly, we took what we already had zoned in the comprehensive plan and went with that, because that's also the same analysis that was done for the transportation system plan. So all that analysis was based on the comprehensive plan zoning as well.
And it came out of your sort of future growth and housing needs analysis process a number of years ago, identified how much of different types of housing was needed in the city, throughout the city. Right. And there was actually some upzoning in this area in the high density and the medium density to get to this. So all of it kind of flowed.
Yeah, we didn't change anything. It's what we already have.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilor.
So to increase high-density residential in this Redwoods, it's a different place. North Redwood plan, it would require
another comprehensive
plan change.
And somebody
a rezone
could do that. Somebody in the future may say, "Hey, we'd like to come in," and then there'd have to be an analysis, a reanalysis of the need for that.
And when was the housing needs study done?
Probably in a week and a half.
No, the one that you were
Oh, that one? 1999 is when, and then 2003 was when it was rezoned. We did an update and a rezoning to say what properties, where do we need more high density, and we're doing that right now. But
so this plan is based on a report that's 12 years old.
From 2003.
Thank you.
And the development, though, of the build-out of this, though, was also analyzed as part of the 2010 Transportation System Plan. So we've done incremental reviews all along the way. We just haven't done a complete revision of that buildable lands. We're in the middle of that right now, actually.
So you're doing another study.
Yeah, you have to look at it.
And we have to make an adjustment to this before the plan.
We may or may not. Based on what I'm finding, is that it will be unlikely that we'll need to do much rezoning, because we've already had quite a bit of stuff in the urban growth boundary, not particularly in the city limits, but in the urban growth boundary, which is what you do base your growth analysis on. So we could be very limited what's in the city limits for types of zoning and for housing types, but in the broader picture of the entire urban growth boundary, we have quite a bit of land available and zoned appropriately for types of residential. So we feel a bind right now because it's not annexed. So until the market moves property and people begin annexing, we're still going to feel like we have a constrained housing stock here.
Did you have a question? No?
I had a
You have one?
yeah. Easy ones. So Matilda, the city's give, so to speak, in this is accepting the wetlands as park. Mm-hmm. And we'll own that park space. That'll be city property. Mm-hmm. Okay. And for Rick, do you have any particular heartburn over us assuming that kind of property?
No, I actually think it will be a pretty good fit with the expansive plan we have over the Willamette River and the land that we already own.
Willow Creek.
And Willow Creek, which extends to the Willamette River. So I think it'll be a wonderful walkway, pedestrian walkway, over a long period of time. Because of the nature of the wetlands, it's not going to require the same level of maintenance that would be required of a park that had to be trimmed and tailored for appropriate uses. One of the things we will need to do is address vegetation, because we want to make sure we use natural vegetation that's that is native to the area. So that'll be a cost, but I'm not anticipating that'd be so severe that it wouldn't be a significant improvement and new resource to the community.
Very good. Thank you. Matilda, what does our plan and or code in that LDR space there to the east of the creek, what's the minimum lot sizes?
They're all the low-density residential, 7,000 to 10,000 is our zoning for
So no
low density.
smaller than 7? Then.
We have provisions in our code for alternative lot layouts and for reducing them to, in a subdivision, down to 5,000 square feet. We have that in our code now.
So
We're not proposing that for this. We're just proposing, what size did we go 5,000 for R1?
Yeah.
So we're going with what is already there. We're just putting it in the district plan. I'm kind of responsible for making this confusing, I think, because as a planner, Brian and I harp about this all the time. But when we have a master plan, we have to chase our code all over the place to figure out, like, somebody creates the plan, then he comes in and tries to interpret the plan, and then we're searching all over our code to figure out, okay, what can they do here? So we said, let's take our plan and make it very explicit and make a district that has all the key elements in one place. So somebody can come in the future when there's a development, open the thing up and go, oh, okay, we don't have to go through 20 chapters of our code to figure out what's allowed here. We call it out. The only thing that's slightly different is the density transfer is we allow the parkland to be considered in part of that developable, part of the park to be allowed as a density transfer. But we're not increasing density. We're just saying you can cluster it over here to recoup some of the fact that some of these properties are severely impacted by the steep slopes and the park dedications.
Right, they are, and I know that's been some of the neighborhood comment concern. I was looking for that minimal number with density transfer. It could be as low as 5,000.
Yeah, but then there's so much constraint, especially on the east side. There's only so much land, so even so you get to add maybe an extra house over there. It's not going to be a lot because there isn't a lot of land to transfer to.
It's steeply sloping.
And the steep slope. So it sounds like it's more like a shell game where the density's not increased. It's just moved around on the lot.
I understand that.
So it's not. We don't think when we looked at the numbers of the potential extra house over here, it's not going to be a whole lot. So you're not going to see something that looks like intense R2 development in the low density. It just won't. It won't work out like that because of the nature of how these are situated.
Okay. Thank you, Mr.
Yeah. Any more questions? Okay. Well, at that point, we're going to open up the public hearing for some testimony.
Super.
We'll open it up here. And anything else from the applicant at this point? No? You guys good? Okay.
We'll be here to answer questions.
So I have no yellow cards or anybody that's necessarily saying anything proponent-wise, unless there's based on the presentation. Now, so gentlemen, you want to bring those cards up, please? Ethan Manuel, come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councilors. My name is Ethan Manuel. I live at 1612 North Redwood Street, which is in approximately the middle of this concept plan. And really my primary goal here is to speak in support of the plan. It's been a long time coming as we went through here. It's been over a year of fairly active public interaction. I'd like to commend city staff as well as the consultants on a great job on the plan. I think it's well thought out. I think it provides a very nice construct for development in the Canby community, staying true to the small town that we have here, but still allows landowners to participate in development. We have, since this was identified as having some unique characteristics, unique challenges, the overlay on this has essentially taken this plot of land and made it not able to participate in annexation and those sorts of things. So other owners who haven't been in one of these sorts of areas have been able to annex over the last 10 years and do what they want with the land, and this has really been constrained by not having a master plan or a concept plan. So I think this is an important step in that. I think it's a good step. And frankly, I would encourage the city to finish up the other concept plans areas in the city that are constraining as well. The only other thing I wanted to bring up was just to suggest to the city that the road that you see on the east there, which was originally designed to be a connector and would come across a bridge, as you heard. But because of cost-prohibitive nature of the bridge, it is now a single road to a cul-de-sac. And as it's currently constructed, it's going to require serial development. So the first piece has to develop and then the next piece and so forth to get access down to the bottom. I would love to see, or would encourage the city to take a leadership role in that space and maybe sponsor some sort of a district there where the road could get put in with support of landowners, obviously, and then the cost recouped for that by the landowners as they develop. So I know there's provisions to do that. So I would like to see the city take on a leadership role there. It's hard for any one property owner to put in a road of that magnitude and wait for cost to be recouped. It's just a difficult financial burden. So other than that, we'd encourage you to approve the plan. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Alan Manuel.
Alan Manuel, 31150 South Needy Road. Mr. Mayor, Council, I was slow to give you my card because I had my notes in the back of it, but I transferred them, so now we are good to go. Resident here of Canby, business and resident in and around Canby since 1969. I've been working on this very project since 1991, which I think is about 24 years ago. I've been actively on this since 2000, pushing to get this done. I'm pleased to see it come to the last meeting. After the council meeting, I went back and on my fingers added up, and I think I have been to 50 meetings on this subject. Neighborhood meetings, council meetings, technical meetings, property owners meetings, on and on and on. And obviously I am here to support the concept. I think it's been put together in an impressive fashion by a wide number of people participating in it. And I am long ago to the point where we need a plan. It doesn't matter to me what you adopt, but if we have a plan, we can move ahead. And I would like to comment about the high density. I know we have to go with the zoning we have. The HDR is mine. The next 2.5 acres is mine too. So if you want to have 5 acres of HDR, there's a good opportunity right there. I know you can't do that, but you might see a request for that in the future. Affordable housing is a real challenge in this community because of the cost of lots and the constraint on getting new lots. With lots starting maybe at 125 or something, you're not going to build a $250,000 house. That is a very worthy concern, whether this project is looking like a rich man's project, an extension of Willow Creek or whatever. We need balanced housing in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Last call for any proponents. Seeing none. Opponents. Mr. Webb.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and council members. First of all, I put in as a proponent when there's only a portion of the plan I want to talk about. As the plan as a whole, I'm very much for it, and I think that I was on the stakeholders committee throughout the process, and I think that the city's done a good job along with the consultants in developing the plan. However, I'd like to address a unique portion about this project, different than anything else in the city that's presently or possibly in the future, and that is this large dedication of parks and what they call open space or natural area. And the concern we have here is, excuse me, is that while the master plan is being considered, this large of a park dedication along Willow Creek, all the wetlands adjoining the creek and the steep areas that are difficult to develop, when looking at the plan on paper, it all looks great. But when you get down into the meat of things, there's nothing in the plan at all to fund any of the plans for the parks or the trails or the bridge or any of that infrastructure. And if there's not funding there for that, I've lived in Canby for 14 years, and I know what happens when parks are dedicated. They rarely, if ever, get. The city is during our stakeholder meetings, etc. I've touched upon it numerous times about maintenance of parks and bringing in new parks. The city staff has indicated you do not have funds to maintain any, let alone build new parks. So our problem with all this is, without that plan in place, in my view, this master plan is not complete. That the city needs to put in place a funding program of some kind, whether it be by a grant, a city improvement district, something to pay for all this and have it in place before the master plan is complete. Because if it's not, and people start annexing and building and dedicating this land to the parks, it'll just sit there like the Willow Creek open area now, Willow Creek Park. And I don't know if any of you have been down there in that area, but you can't walk through it anymore. Most of the open water, if you look at aerial shots that go back to 2005 even, and the aerials showed a lot of open water in that area. Now it's completely covered. Can't even see it anymore. And I really think this would be a hazard area for the city to own. If a child got down in here and walked through here, you could lose a child in there. I've walked through the area down there and been walking along and went up to my chest in a hole in these areas through the wetlands and the creek. And I just think the city, they don't put a development plan or something within the development plan, the master plan, to fund all this walkway, the parks, and the bridge, then I think the city is just going to have a mess on their hands, and a very unattractive area, because it'll never get developed otherwise. And I think if the city doesn't put the plan in place, then they should leave all this, let the property owners and developers pay SDCs, use your SDCs to develop the parks that you already have in place, leave the wetlands and everything to the property owners to put it into common grounds for the subdivisions, or leave it as part of the lot configuration, and let the private parties maintain it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Mr. Rob.
And I don't disagree with those comments.
No, I don't either.
I think that they're right on point. The underlying question is whether we can maintain after we acquire, and whether the maintenance cost associated with a fully improved park is greater than, equal to, or less than a park left in a natural condition. And it's a good question. It's one for which we don't have an answer yet.
Yeah, to your point there, Rick, that is, I mean, it's a bigger, you see that throughout our park system here. And what does adding more parks mean, and how do we maintain that? Matilda, you want to speak to anything regarding that piece?
Well, I actually have a lot of thoughts about that. I think there's a big gorilla in the room, which is, how are we going to take care of all of our parks, and how are we going to provide parks for the community in the future? And I think that's something that's going to be an issue that the council is probably going to have to be working on with